In 1870, a young businessman in Cleveland controlled a mere 4% of America's oil refining capacity. 10 years later, his grip had tightened to 90%. By 1904, he commanded 91% of production and 85% of all sales. His name was John D. Rockefeller, and the architectural framework he engineered didn't just dominate oil. It became the genetic code of every monopoly that would follow for the next century and a half. When Standard Oil shattered under court order in 1911, most assumed the empire had fallen. They were catastrophically wrong. The corporation didn't die. It evolved, multiplied, and spread like a virus into every sector of modern commerce. The gasoline fueling your vehicle, the pharmaceuticals in your medicine cabinet, the digital platforms devouring your attention, the food filling your refrigerator, the banks holding your savings. Every single one operates from Rockefeller's original blueprint. He invented vertical integration that devours entire supply chains from raw material to consumer. He perfected horizontal consolidation that systematically eliminates rivals. He pioneered regulatory capture that transforms government watchdogs into industry lapdogs. He weaponized tax-exempt foundations to sculpt public policy from behind closed doors. He achieved market dominance so absolute that meaningful competition became nothing more than theater. Rockefeller didn't merely construct an oil company. He architected the skeletal structure of corporate supremacy that continues shaping your daily existence in ways you've never recognized. You cannot step outside the system because the system isn't Standard Oil. The system is methodology. That methodology has been cloned, refined, and deployed by every dominant corporate force for 150 years. Amazon implements it with ruthless precision. Google has perfected it for the digital age. Pfizer embraces it in pharmaceuticals. J.P. Morgan Chase operates within its framework in finance. They all studied from identical instruction, the Rockefeller playbook. Seize control of the supply chain from extraction to delivery. Systematically crush competitors across every market segment. Capture the regulators whose job is to constrain you. Deploy strategic philanthropy to manufacture public legitimacy and political influence. And when government authorities finally attempt to dismantle your empire, ensure the fragmented pieces you control exceed the original whole in total value. Let me reveal with surgical precision how Rockefeller constructed this apparatus, how he leveraged it to accumulate wealth beyond any individual in human history, how Standard Oil's court-ordered dissolution actually multiplied his fortune rather than diminishing it, and why 114 years after that supposed breakup, you remain completely trapped inside the world Rockefeller engineered. Understanding the system isn't an academic exercise in business history, it's existential awareness for financial survival. The machinery extracts wealth from your labor and spending, then funnels it upward to concentrated power at the apex. Once you perceive its operation clearly, you'll recognize its fingerprints on virtually every major transaction in your economic life. Born on July 8, 1839 in Richford, New York, John Davidson Rockefeller inherited contradictory genetic material that would define his approach to empire building. His father was a traveling con artist who peddled fraudulent cancer cures to desperate people. His mother practiced devout Baptist faith with unwavering conviction. This psychological fusion, the con artist's calculating manipulation merged with the true believer's absolute moral certainty, forged Rockefeller's business philosophy into something uniquely dangerous. He would systematically annihilate business competition without hesitation or remorse, while simultaneously maintaining that God himself had selected him to organize American industry for humanity's collective benefit. This wasn't hypocrisy or cynical manipulation. This was utterly sincere belief that his monopoly served profound moral purpose by transforming wasteful chaos into productive order and transforming inefficient competition into streamlined efficiency. The year 1859 brought oil discovery to Titusville, Pennsylvania, igniting a rush that transformed the region overnight. Thousands of fortune seekers flooded into western Pennsylvania chasing black gold beneath the soil. Fortunes materialized and evaporated within days. Pure economic chaos governed the landscape. Boom and bust cycles swung wildly. Overproduction obliterated prices, sending them into freefall. Then scarcity would launch them skyward again. Young Rockefeller, just 20 years old and working as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, identified opportunity in this chaos, but not in drilling, which represented volatility, enormous risk, and complete dependence on geological chance. Rockefeller saw genuine potential in refining, the process of transforming crude petroleum into kerosene for lamplighting. That represented sustainable business with controllable variables. In 1863, Rockefeller invested $4,000 of his savings into his first oil refinery in Cleveland. Within just 2 years, it had become the largest refinery in the entire city. But Cleveland hosted 30 competing refineries at that time. Competition was absolutely brutal. Profit margins were razor thin. Most operations teetered constantly at bankruptcy's edge, one bad quarter away from collapse. This crucible is where Rockefeller's strategic brilliance crystallized into something unprecedented. He consciously rejected competing on price within the existing market structure. Instead, he pursued something far more ambitious and far more ruthless: the elimination of competition entirely. He achieved this systematic destruction through a methodology that would eventually become the foundation of American corporate structure itself: vertical integration. Controlling every single stage of production defines vertical integration in its purest form. Most refineries in Cleveland simply refined oil. They purchased crude petroleum from independent drillers, refined it into kerosene, then sold that kerosene to independent distributors who handled retail sales. These refineries commanded exactly one step in a multi-step process. Rockefeller made the revolutionary decision to command all steps simultaneously. He acquired barrel manufacturing facilities outright, eliminating the need to purchase barrels from suppliers. He purchased tank cars and negotiated exclusive railroad access to transport his own oil under his own control. He bought warehouses throughout the region for storage and distribution. He acquired retail distribution networks to sell directly to end consumers, cutting out middlemen. Every single step that formerly represented a separate business generating profit for someone else, Rockefeller systematically internalized into Standard Oil. This structural transformation delivered massive, insurmountable cost advantages over every competitor. While rival refineries paid 25 cents per barrel purchasing from independent barrel makers, Rockefeller produced his own for just 15 cents, a 40% cost reduction on a major input. While competitors paid standard rates to railroads for oil transportation, Rockefeller owned his own tank cars and negotiated secret rebate agreements with the railroads. The railroads actually paid him to ship his oil while simultaneously charging his competitors premium rates. This transcended mere efficiency or smart business practice. This was economic predation as corporate strategy. Rockefeller could sell kerosene at prices that drove competitors into bankruptcy while simultaneously maintaining healthy profit margins himself. And that became his precise strategy, executed with mechanical precision. By 1870, Rockefeller formally incorporated Standard Oil Company of Ohio. His refinery capacity had exploded from one small facility into the largest refining operation on the planet, but he still commanded only 4% of total American refining capacity. For Rockefeller's ambitions, this was completely insufficient, so he initiated the second phase of his conquest strategy: horizontal integration. While vertical integration means controlling the entire supply chain from raw material to consumer, horizontal integration means systematically purchasing or destroying every single competitor operating at your level. In 1872, Rockefeller launched what business historians now call the Cleveland Massacre. Over the course of just 3 months, Rockefeller personally approached every single refinery owner in Cleveland with a simple proposition. He offered to purchase their refineries outright. If they agreed to his terms, he paid fair market value and frequently offered them management positions within Standard Oil. If they refused his offer, he initiated economic warfare. Rockefeller would immediately drop his kerosene prices below production cost. His competitors, who couldn't possibly produce as cheaply due to his vertical integration advantages, hemorrhaged money on every single sale. They faced exactly 2 options: sell to Rockefeller on his terms, or continue operating until bankruptcy, at which point Rockefeller would purchase the assets for pennies on the dollar. Most sold immediately. A few attempted to fight. Every single one eventually lost. By the conclusion of 1872, Rockefeller controlled 25 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. He had leaped from 4% to 25% of total American refining capacity in just 90 days. The blueprint was now firmly established and proven. Make a purchase offer. If refused, deploy economic destruction, then buy the wreckage. This exact methodology would subsequently saturate every major American industry, deployed by every would-be monopolist for the next 150 years. But Cleveland alone didn't satisfy Rockefeller's ambitions. He wanted the entire nation under his control. Throughout the 1870s, Rockefeller systematically expanded Standard Oil's reach across America like a conquering army. He purchased refineries in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and beyond. Identical tactics deployed everywhere with mechanical consistency. Secret railroad rebate agreements making his shipping costs structurally lower than any competitor could achieve. Vertical integration in making his production cost the absolute lowest in every market. And ruthless, sustained price wars that destroyed anyone who refused to sell their operations to Standard Oil. By 1879, Standard Oil commanded a staggering 90% of America's total refining capacity. 90%. That's not a successful business competing in a market. That's a monopoly that has effectively eliminated the market itself. But here Rockefeller's true strategic genius fully surfaced. He thoroughly understood that monopolies confront 2 fundamental existential problems. First, they're illegal. The Sherman Antitrust Act, passed in 1890, was written specifically to target and dismantle monopolies exactly like Standard Oil. Second, they're universally despised by the public. Americans loathed Rockefeller personally. Newspapers called him a robber baron, a ruthless tyrant, the single most hated man in America. Rockefeller desperately required a solution to both problems simultaneously, and his lawyers discovered it, the corporate trust. In 1882, Rockefeller's legal team created the Standard Oil Trust, a revolutionary corporate structure. The mechanism worked like this. Standard Oil of Ohio couldn't legally own and operate companies in other states under existing law, but a trust could. Rockefeller created a trust that held the stock certificates of all Standard Oil subsidiary companies. 41 shareholders, all Rockefeller himself and his closest associates, controlled the trust through voting rights. The trust controlled all the operating companies. This became the first major corporate trust in American history, and it immediately became the structural model for every trust that followed. The Sugar Trust, the Tobacco Trust, the Steel Trust, all directly copied Rockefeller's innovative structure. The trust permitted Rockefeller to control a truly nationwide monopoly while technically remaining in compliance with state-level corporate laws. More importantly, it created an entirely novel legal entity. The trust wasn't a traditional company that produced goods. It was a holding company. It produced nothing whatsoever. It simply owned other companies that produced. This holding company structure would eventually evolve into the modern corporation, the parent company that owns multiple subsidiaries operating in different markets. Berkshire Hathaway, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon. Every one of them represents a direct descendant of Rockefeller's trust structure. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled a staggering 91% of all oil refining in America and 85% of final sales to consumers. Rockefeller had become the wealthiest individual on planet Earth. His net worth reached $900 million. That's approximately $25 billion in today's currency. But that figure represents merely his paper wealth at that moment. At his absolute peak in 1913, Rockefeller's wealth is estimated at $400 billion when adjusted for inflation. That makes him wealthier than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates combined at their peaks, the single wealthiest individual in modern recorded history. And he constructed that incomprehensible wealth through the system. Vertical integration, eliminating cost competition. Horizontal consolidation, eliminating market competition. Legal structures, concentrating control in fewer hands. This was the system in its purest form. But public sentiment was turning decisively against monopolies and the men who built them. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, explicitly criminalizing monopolistic practices. In 1906, investigative journalist Ida Tarbell published her explosive work, The History of the Standard Oil Company, methodically exposing Rockefeller's tactics to public scrutiny, secret railroad rebate agreements, predatory below-cost pricing, systematically crushing competitors. The public outcry was enormous and sustained. In 1911, the United States Supreme Court ruled definitively that Standard Oil constituted an illegal monopoly under federal law and ordered its immediate breakup into 34 completely separate companies. This should have represented the absolute end, the destruction of Rockefeller's system, the dismantling of his empire. But it represented nothing of the sort. It was actually the beginning of the system's evolution into something far more resilient, because when Standard Oil fractured into 34 pieces, Rockefeller still personally owned shares in all 34 companies. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco. Standard Oil of Ohio became Sohio, which was later acquired by British Petroleum. The court-ordered breakup didn't destroy Rockefeller's accumulated wealth. It actually multiplied it exponentially. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was valued at approximately $600 per share. After the forced breakup, the combined value of shares in all 34 successor companies exceeded $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's personal wealth nearly tripled from the breakup that was supposed to destroy him. Why did this happen? Because the breakup forced each newly independent company to genuinely compete, which drove rapid innovation, improved efficiency, and increased profitability. And because fracturing one massive monopoly into 34 companies that still dominated their respective regional markets wasn't genuinely dismantling the monopoly. It was simply reorganizing the monopoly into a more politically acceptable structure. Today, more than a century later, most of those 34 companies have systematically merged back together. Exxon and Mobil merged in 1999, reconstituting much of the original empire. Chevron purchased Standard Oil of Kentucky and absorbed Gulf Oil. British Petroleum bought both Amoco and Sohio. The Standard Oil monopoly that was supposedly shattered in 1911 has essentially reconsolidated into three dominant firms: ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP. The system dismantled itself to avoid immediate regulatory destruction, then quietly, methodically reassembled itself over the following century. But Standard Oil itself isn't even Rockefeller's most enduring legacy to American capitalism. The genuine legacy is the system itself, the methods, the structures, the playbook. Let me demonstrate how it's being deployed in major industries right now in 2025. Amazon deploys vertical integration with precision that would make Rockefeller envious. Amazon originated as a simple online bookstore. Today, it commands virtually the entire supply chain. It owns the massive warehouses where products are stored. It owns the sophisticated logistics networks that move products. It owns the delivery trucks that bring products to your door. It owns the payment processing systems that handle transactions. It even owns the cloud computing infrastructure that hosts many of its competitors' websites. Amazon Web Services generates over $90 billion in annual revenue. That's substantially more than Amazon's entire retail operation profit. Rockefeller controlled refineries, railroads, and distribution networks. Amazon controls retail, logistics, and the digital infrastructure of modern commerce. Same playbook, different century, different industry. Amazon also utilizes horizontal consolidation aggressively. It systematically purchases competitors when possible. Whole Foods, Zappos, Twitch, Ring, MGM Studios. Over 100 acquisitions in total. When purchasing a competitor proves impossible or too expensive, Amazon deploys a more subtle tactic. It copies their most successful products and undercuts their pricing using proprietary data from its own marketplace. Third-party sellers are required to report detailed sales data to Amazon. Amazon's algorithms analyze that data, identify the most successful products, create Amazon Basics versions, then promote them above the originals in search results. This represents the modern version of Rockefeller's predatory price war. Perfectly legal, barely regulated, devastatingly effective at eliminating competition. Google employs the trust structure that Rockefeller pioneered. Alphabet serves as a holding company that owns Google, YouTube, Waymo, DeepMind, Verily, and dozens of other subsidiary companies operating in different markets. It's the Standard Oil Trust reborn, one parent company controlling multiple operating companies across diverse industries. This structure shields the parent from legal liability originating in subsidiaries. It permits sophisticated tax optimization across different jurisdictions. And it makes regulatory breakup extraordinarily complicated because each subsidiary is technically a separate legal entity. Pharmaceutical companies use Rockefeller's regulatory capture strategy with remarkable sophistication. Rockefeller didn't simply compete within existing market rules. He actively shaped the rules themselves to favor Standard Oil. He lobbied extensively for railroad regulations that benefited his operations. He worked directly with politicians to establish quality standards for kerosene that his refineries could easily meet but competitors couldn't achieve. Today, major pharmaceutical companies replicate this exact approach. They fund the FDA partially through user fees, creating financial dependency. They lobby aggressively for patent extensions that eliminate generic competition. They literally draft portions of the regulations that supposedly regulate their industry. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck. They learn directly from Rockefeller's playbook. Control the regulators, and you effectively control the entire market. The financial sector extensively uses holding company structures pioneered by Rockefeller's trust. J.P. Morgan Chase operates as a holding company that owns Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan Investment Bank, and numerous other subsidiaries. Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all structured as holding companies. When Dodd-Frank legislation attempted to regulate banks more strictly after the 2008 financial crisis, the holding company structure made effective regulation nearly impossible to implement. Which specific entity do you regulate? The parent holding company or the individual operating subsidiaries? Different rules apply to different entities. Rockefeller solved this regulatory problem in 1882. Major banks simply copied his proven solution a century later. And then there's strategic philanthropy. Rockefeller's most brilliant innovation for buying legitimacy and influence. In 1913, Rockefeller created the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial endowment of $250 million, over $7 billion in today's currency. The foundation funded medical research, educational institutions, and public health initiatives. On the surface, this appeared to be pure charity, Rockefeller generously giving back to society. But examine the structure more carefully and deeper motivations emerge clearly. The foundation allowed Rockefeller to legally avoid massive estate taxes that would have otherwise consumed much of his wealth. It gave him direct control over which universities received substantial funding, which translated into effective control over what subjects were taught and what research was conducted. It purchased public legitimacy at scale. The man who had systematically destroyed thousands of competitors and was widely hated became rebranded as a generous philanthropist. America's most despised robber baron transformed into a beloved public benefactor through strategic giving. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the complete restructuring of modern medical education in America. It provided massive funding to Johns Hopkins, University of Chicago, and Rockefeller University. It established the dominant model for medical schools that emphasized pharmaceutical interventions over holistic care approaches. This isn't conspiracy theory or speculation. This is thoroughly documented historical fact. The foundation strategically shaped American medicine to favor the pharmaceutical model, and pharmaceutical companies, many of which descended directly from Standard Oil's chemical divisions, profited enormously from this transformation. Today, virtually every billionaire uses the Rockefeller philanthropic playbook. Bill Gates founded the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with $75 billion in assets. It funds global health initiatives, shapes World Health Organization policy, and influences national government health decisions. Mark Zuckerberg created the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Warren Buffett pledged the majority of his wealth to the Gates Foundation. These aren't simply charitable gestures. They're sophisticated vehicles for tax avoidance, legacy construction, and policy influence. Rockefeller invented the model in 1913. Modern billionaires have merely perfected and scaled it. The Rockefeller family itself persists and remains influential in 2025. David Rockefeller, John D's grandson, died in 2017 at age 101. He served as chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank and founded the Trilateral Commission. He was one of global finance's most powerful individuals for 50 consecutive years. The family's wealth, currently estimated at $11 billion, is distributed across hundreds of separate trusts and foundations. Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Rockefeller Family Fund, David Rockefeller Fund. They continue shaping policy, funding research, and influencing politics 150 years after John D. started Standard Oil. Here's the most critical point. The system isn't designed to allow escape. It's deliberately designed for invisibility until you're already completely trapped within it. You purchase gasoline refined by ExxonMobil or Chevron, direct descendants of Standard Oil. You buy products from Amazon, which deploys Rockefeller's vertical integration and horizontal consolidation. You search on Google, structured as a holding company trust like Standard Oil. You take pharmaceuticals developed through a medical system fundamentally shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants and funding priorities. You bank with financial institutions using Rockefeller's holding company structures. Your tax dollars fund regulatory agencies whose rules were often written by the very industries being regulated, exactly as Rockefeller pioneered. The system perpetuates itself automatically. It concentrates wealth upward. It systematically eliminates competition. It captures regulatory agencies. It uses strategic philanthropy to purchase legitimacy while minimizing tax obligations. This is the Rockefeller system operating in 2025. It's not conspiracy, it's simply corporate structure, perfectly legal, broadly accepted, and replicated by every dominant company in every major industry. You cannot escape it because it's become the infrastructure of modern capitalism itself.